Here's a Mornings with Mike Winters fun fact. U-Haul is the world's largest advertiser in the Yellow Pages. Too bad millennials don't know what the Yellow Pages are. Here's Mike Winters.
Or move. But anyway, it's 27 minutes.
Phone book is.
There you go. This is true. At least not a paper one.
Yeah, for sure.
Good morning. It is 7:27. Joining us in studio this morning from upstairs, actually, from Bristol Law Office, Matt Bristol back with us. Good morning.
Morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing good. How was your weekend?
Good, good. Like I said, it was nice with the weather change, and it was
yeah.
Sure, I know, like I said, they had the soft open for the pool and stuff. Probably not the most ideal weather for pool opening, but I don't think anybody's complaining. So.
Oh, it was nice weather. It's got a lot of yard work done Saturday when it was cool. Temperature was good.
Yeah, that's a good. That was a good reason to get out and do some stuff that you've been putting off. And you're like, oh, it's 100, or you didn't want to get up at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday to do it. So
yep.
So hopefully some got that. Not so much me, but For folks that aren't familiar, Matt joins us once a month and gives out sage legal advice. We'll talk anything from financial planning a little bit with, and not so much in like what your accountant would talk to you about, but what your lawyer would talk to you about. When it talks about what's the legalities of what you're doing, or if you're trying to set up something for like a lot of small business talk, if you're trying to do like LLCs and things.
We do that too.
We talk a lot about that kind of stuff. So Matt joins us once a month and usually gives a lot of times we try to talk timely stuff, depending on the time of the year and things like that. So, but we got more to talk about this time too. So.
Yeah, usually we're the second Monday of each month, but we had some political stuff earlier this month.
This is true.
Kind of bumped me a little bit.
Old politics get bumping us, so.
That's all right. That's that. Well, at least we get to vote. We're lucky in that regard.
This is true. This is very true.
Some countries you don't get to vote.
Or even, get the perception of voting sometimes.
Yeah, that too. That too.
But, and something, I think all of our conversations are always, kind of geared towards the family or small business, and hopefully we try to make it as information that usually at any given point in your life, you're probably going to deal with some of the things we talk about, whether it's earlier in your life or later in your life. But odds are pretty good you're going to have to deal with some of the stuff we talk about at some point.
Yeah. It's amazing that this stuff just always comes in cycles, and sooner or later the wheel turns. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And at least once a month, somebody comes in and maybe it's the context of a divorce, maybe it's a bankruptcy, and the wife will say, "Well, those aren't my bills; those are his bills."
When you're married, they aren't.
That's right. So, once you're married, it's our bills.
That's right.
Regardless of who ran them up.
Well, it's think of it this way. You get the positive and the negative there. So if you've got a spouse that's meticulous about paying bills, you get the benefit of the good credit rating and all that too. However, not so much, and you're both going down together. So
yeah, so you have to be really careful about that, about your spouse and the bills they run up, because you are liable. Those are your bills. And it's kind of like a business partnership. If Mike and Matt are in business together and Matt runs up all sorts of bills Mike didn't know about, then too bad.
Yeah.
Mike's liable.
This is pick better partners. That's the rule there.
Pick better partners, communicate, talk
exactly.
better. Yeah. Don't just too many people, they just dump the responsibility on one spouse.
Sure.
And
well,
that spouse may or may not be good with bill paying.
Yeah, and I think and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but if you don't trust who you're doing, then it could be a bad thing. I think for people that aren't necessarily good at these things, it can be a good thing that have someone that's kind of watching out for you and train. But if you're not actively engaged in it and your partner screws up, then you know what I'm saying? You're just as liable as they are, because you, in essence, are putting too much trust into something that you should also be talking and having an interest in. So.
Well, money's a really funny subject in our society, and we really don't talk about it very much. And unfortunately, that carries over to when people are contemplating marriage. They still don't talk about money when they should.
And the things that can make or break a marriage are those types of things. And if you don't have a plan or at least an understanding on how each other operates there, then you're setting yourself up for failure from the get-go.
Yeah. And like my wife and I, we were very lucky. We talked about budgeting before we got married. We decided to have a household account that would pay household bills. And so how much would each one of us put in it and what bills would that pay? But then we each had our own money.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted a new toy, then I would use my money, not
Sure.
the household money.
Exactly, yeah.
And that way I didn't have to call up and say, gee, honey, is there enough money in savings for me to get a new shotgun or whatever? But people need to talk about their money. Mexico's a community property state.
Mm-hmm.
There are only 8 community property states in the country.
And we're one of them.
We're one of them. And most of them in the Southwest. I think 1 or 2 states adopted it by statute. But a lot of states are moving towards the idea of community property.
Is that one of the areas we're ahead of the curve on?
It is.
Weird. We're not ahead of the curve so much in New Mexico.
Well, the English system, the English settled along the East Coast. And the English system, the husband owned everything.
Gotcha.
He owned the wife. He owned the kids. They were all his property.
I got a feeling that method of thought isn't going to fly too well these days. So.
No, but so they had these weird ideas called dower and courtesy of the wife's interest in the husband's property. And we didn't study a whole lot of that in law school because I went to law school in a community property state in Texas. So the Texas community property laws are slightly different than New Mexico's.
Sure.
But in a community property state, once you're married, everything is everybody's. It's all owned 50-50.
And I don't know, just in my head, that sounds like the way it should be. I mean, because that's in essence what you're creating when you create a marriage. You're creating a civil and spiritual union here, right. and with that comes a melding of each other, and that includes, all those vows and things you take. That's what all that means. You know what I mean? You should pay attention to those. But really, if without a plan, you're making yourself really hard for all that stuff, and that's kind of why we're here, and why Matt's telling you, these are the little ingredients that are the difference between success and failure sometimes.
So one of the exceptions let's see. So anything acquired during the marriage is community property that isn't sole and separate. It's kind of a weird definition.
Okay.
So during the marriage, you can still acquire what are called sole and separate assets, typically by gift or inheritance.
Okay.
So if you're married, but grandma leaves you an inheritance, then that is your sole and separate property, but it's business-wise best to keep it separate.
Gotcha.
In a whole separate account.
Okay. Don't meld it or mix it in with the family money or community money there.
Right. It's called commingling.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can trace the sole and separate property, but sometimes it gets commingled to the point where it loses its status as sole and separate.
Gotcha.
But it's just good business to keep business.
Sure. I would imagine, especially if you have a partnership with a spouse, that it's very much mine, yours. You know what I mean? If there's already that mindset in the marriage going in, that probably, you definitely want to make sure just in case things go south down the road here. So.
And you can have a prenup.
Mm-hmm. Do you do prenups, postnups? There's laws allowing you to do all these things.
Right. So that's a good question. Can a husband and wife contract with each other?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Husband and wife can enter into contracts with each other. And one of those could be like a postnuptial agreement, or maybe it's a contract for a specific asset. So it could be a very limited or very broad. We're seeing some of that now with older folks who maybe the spouse is going to need to go into a nursing home.
Gotcha.
And
you're worrying about losing your assets and things for
right.
Long-term care, things like that.
Yeah. So for some of the older folks, we're doing post-nuptial agreements that separates the assets 50-50 now, so that if one spouse does go into a nursing home, only that spouse's assets are spent for the nursing home, and the non-nursing home spouse's assets are protected. They get to keep those. They don't have to spend them down.
Gotcha. I'm kind of curious. Would they use this for, like, say, or does that get into more LLC stuff where say one of the spouses is like, I want to start a business, blah, 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 but they don't want to get the other spouse's credit and everything else involved with it. I mean, would they do agreements like through that, or is that all go under like an LLC or something when the person's trying to start a business?
Well, I'm not sure. Ask that question
Like
another way.
say you do like a post-nup or,
Okay.
like you're talking about a contract or whatever, but say one of the spouses has an idea of wanting to start a business, the other one's not really on board with it.
Yeah, you could do a post-up on that.
Would that fall in that area, or
Yeah.
would that go into more like, oh, no, you need to set up if you're going to do an LLC or whatever? How are you going to set up your business?
No, that'd be a post-up.
Okay.
Because what actually happened one time, a wife comes in and says, I can't believe my husband's on one of his wild hair brain schemes again. And he thinks he's going to make all this money and he never works. And I don't want to have anything to do with it. How
Okay.
do I stay out of that? And I said, well, it's like a post-up. She goes, well, he's going to do an LLC. I said, well, anything created during the marriage is still community property.
Gotcha.
So you got to have the
So you're still
post-up.
on the hook for it,
Right.
even if you want nothing to do with it,
Right. You're still on the hook for it.
unless you do a post-nup.
Unless you do a post-up.
Okay. That's where I was kind of wondering if that fell under that or that fell under more of the business protections and things like that. But
And then sometimes we see that with real estate.
okay.
If Mike gets an inheritance and wants to buy, a hunking big house with the inheritance, then Mike has wife sign a sole and separate property agreement that the house is Mike's sole and separate because it was purchased with Mike's inheritance.
Gotcha. So if Mike defaults on it, she won't get dinged for the credit issues and things that come with that.
That, and she would not necessarily inherit it all.
Gotcha. So if it's a big success, she ain't getting none either, unless Mike decides, I changed your mind. You can have it now.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I talk Mike third person in that case, because I don't have nothing like that.
And Kim would be right there with you.
That's right. She
Uh-huh.
would be right with me, either yelling at me or right there side by side. Either way, but
But so inheritance, if you die without a will, okay, so the state says who gets your stuff if you die without a will. So, but even if there's a second marriage and wife has a whole bunch of sole and separate property she came into the second marriage with, but if wife dies without a will, husband still gets 1/4 of her sole and separate estate.
interesting.
And 3/4 goes to her children.
Gotcha.
Does not all go to her children. So if you want your kids to get it all,
You need to
have a
state-
will.
Yep.
have a
State
written
as
will-
such.
Written will.
Of course, I guess if you don't mind your husband getting some, then or spouse there, then you're okay. But most people want to know or want to dictate exactly where that money goes. They don't want a government or someone else making that decision for them. So that's
Right.
why you get your wills, and that's why you make sure they're updated. I'm not saying every other week go in there and change it, but if you haven't done one in 20 years or it's 20 years old, maybe you need to update that will a little bit to reflect your current situation.
And sometimes it just takes a small amendment or codicil, a little change here, a little change there. Don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
Sure. But anytime, say, you have a kid or, a new addition to the family, or obviously if you divorce, remarry, these are issues that definitely want you looking at your wills and things like that. But you also may have gotten more assets since the last time you've done that will. And is that covered as well? And that's where you need to make sure you're up on top of that stuff pretty regularly.
Yeah, maybe so. I had a couple come in, and this was a second marriage for them both. And they had, each of them had children from prior marriages who were older, late teens, early 20s. And they had, during the marriage, they'd acquired some assets together, community property. And they were talking about wills and asking me, well, how do we do this? And what if we want that? And how do we make sure we take care of my spouse? I'm going to leave enough for my spouse so they're okay, but then I want my kids to be okay.
Sure.
And so how do they do that kind of thing? And so we talked. I said, okay, you got some retirement accounts? Yeah. Well, so you can divide those up any way you want.
Mm-hmm.
Half to the spouse, half to the kids, or all to the spouse, maybe some other asset to the kids.
Sure, yeah.
So I said, something else to think about is now, when they're working kids, is say, tell you what, kid, if you start saving $100 a month, I'll match it. Teach the kid how to be financially stable and on their own feet.
Sure.
And give them basically create their inheritance.
They create the inheritance, but also understand the value of it and will respect it more when it is time to dip into it. I'm hoping anyway.
Right.
That's the idea. Yeah.
And if these kids can build enough financial security before mom passes away, then mom's done her job of making sure her kids are financially taken care of.
Yeah, and in essence, what you've done is you've created some generational wealth there, and they can use that to help their kids, your grandkids, or your great grandkids. You know, that's how generational wealth works. It's by just a little smart planning over the years. And you know, now I know some of us are kind of, dang, why did my grandparents do this? And I'd be better off. But that's
because nobody talked about money.
Exactly. You know, so now set that trend. So your grandkids are going, man, grandma and grandpa really did me right by doing this.
Got to teach them while they're young of how money works, how to save, how to don't live below your means, save the difference. I know it sounds trite, but that it works.
It's I'm telling you, that's the difference between, a hassle. I wouldn't say hassle-free life, but you certainly are going to have a lot less stress in your life if you plan accordingly with this stuff, rather than just, live your life and then come to every emergency situation, deal with it accordingly. You know what I mean? I get mindsets. Some people have the mindset of I'm going to plan for everything, and then others, it's like they fly by the seat of their pants.
Right.
I'm not a fan of either extreme. I don't want the one that's meticulously planning the next time I breathe or go to the bathroom or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't want the other one saying, I don't know, I live where the wind blows me either. I'm kind of in the middle there. I want, I want some planning, but at the same time, I don't want, what are you doing at 8:15 tomorrow morning? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, you have to understand, the farther away you plan, the more general that plan's going to be.
Yeah.
And the more closer in time it's going to be, the more specific you can be.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't be OCD about it. You can't say, okay, in 15 years from this day, I'm going to be on an X spot.
Right.
Because you just don't really know.
Sure.
You can say that my best shot is that's what I want.
Well, I mean, you always have goals and plans. Like in 10 years, I want to be retired, or in 10 years, I want to be the president of the company, or whatever that is. But yeah, it's more general like that. It's not like in 10 years, I want to have a net worth of 1.2 and whatever it is you're trying to do. And that's, and that's where you kind of got to, because I would guess too, a little flexibility is a good thing. You know what I mean? If you're able to pivot and you set yourself up to pivot when those moments in life come where you have a decision to make, if a little planning allows those pivots to, it also mitigates the impact when we're like, okay, this could be bad, could be really good, but with planning, the bad could be marginally bad instead of really bad. You know what I mean? And the good can be that much better. That's either, if you plan better, it also gets you better educated when those moments you're going to take a little gamble or try to do something that maybe is a little out of your comfort zone,
Yeah. So you got to be flexible. So if you have a set plan and you don't take advantage of opportunities, that's probably not a good thing.
Sure.
If you have no plan at all, then you're going to end up anywhere. Who knows where you're going to end up?
Sure.
But if you had more of a general idea plan that then you keep with an open mind, you can take advantage of opportunities.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a lot like playing poker. Did you ever play poker when you were younger?
I have, and poorly, but yeah.
Okay. All right, so you got,
I have on occasion.
So you got 7-card stud, right?
I got a bad poker face.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you got a table, the 7-card stud, and the cards are dealt, and you look at everything, and you look at your cards, and you watch how people bet, and that affects how you're betting.
Sure.
All of a sudden, there's a new set of cards dealt. Okay, everything just changed, and so you got to stay flexible. And as circumstances change, you have to change with the circumstances.
Sure.
So sometimes your best guess is based on today's certain set of cards.
This is true.
But if new cards are dealt and somebody changes their betting pattern, then you got to be flexible.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. When, what we're trying to get people steer towards is, starting this stuff early, before you're married or when you first get married, these kind of things. But obviously, when you're coming up with your game plan at that time, what the world's going to look like 30 years from that moment may not be what you think it's going to look like. And that's where we're talking about here is an opportunity may change, or a technology, or, like I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure Matt Bristol didn't know a thing about cryptocurrency when he was courting his wife. You know what I mean? And they're dating. And now that's, so, obviously they're not planning for something like that there. But, nowadays you might, maybe that's something I'd look at to invest in. But either way, to plan back then, he gives them the ability to research that now, is what I'm saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for young adults, another thing to be flexible about is since 2009, we've had low interest rates, rising stock market, buy the dip, it always comes back, and all that is changing now. The stock market is changing how it's going to behave. The interest rates are changing. Inflation's changing. The supply chain issues are affecting all of that.
Big time, yeah.
A lot of dominoes going down that we don't know where they're going to end up.
Sure.
So, stay flexible with your plan, and things aren't going to be the way they were the last few years.
Absolutely. And that's really the best or most sage advice you can give someone when it comes to financial or family legal planning, things like that, is when times get volatile and things like that, have that plan. Talk to, in case of like your LLCs or any of these things, talk to your lawyer, or if you don't have one, Matt, be happy to talk to you about these things. But that's that, stay in contact with that. And same thing with your financial planners, that when it's volatile like this, you need to, be in touch with the guy that you're doing your mutual funds or whatever, whatever your 401k, whatever you got that set up through. Matt's a lawyer. That's not his job here per se, but I mean, he deals with a lot of those same things. But those are the people you need to talk to about that, and so using that expert advice when you're unsure, or maybe you want to do something, but you need to decide: am I talking myself into something dumb here, or no? This is a legit opportunity. That's why you talk to the experts. That's why, when you have a legal issue like that, you call Matt Bristol up and say, is this something I'm okay with, or do I need to do a little bit more planning? And Matt will give you the same thing with your financial planning person. They'll do the same thing for you.
It's cheaper to ask up front than try to fix it in the back end. It's just so much cheaper to.
And unfortunately, finances is a world where we think we know a bunch, or we want to pretend we know a bunch, because I still feel there's that stigma, like if you act like you don't know what you're talking about, people think less of you. You know what I mean? It's just like once we hit adults, like we're supposed to automatically know some of this stuff. And unless your parents worked with you or you had someone in your life that did that, you're not going to learn it through osmosis. You've got to be exposed to it and do it. So don't be embarrassed by that stuff. Ask those questions. Learn those. The person that goes in and asks the questions and learns it, and then learns it late, is going to be way more successful than the person that just tries to wing it. I guarantee you that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's proper planning prevents poor performance. That's what we used to say in the Scouts. The 6 Ps.
And quite frankly, if the more you did that, I'm I hate to do this, but it might be a lot less work for Matt in the long run, because he spends probably more time cleaning up these messes than he does, dealing with issues when those messes weren't created in the first place. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I enjoy when people say, hey, make an appointment. I'm thinking about going and buying a condo with my boyfriend. And it's like, why? Well, it's a good investment. Okay, that's fine, but you're not boyfriend, you're not married, and what's the exit plan? He says, well, what do you mean exit plan? Okay, so boyfriend's mom lives in North Dakota, gets suddenly critically ill, and he says, I need to go stay with mom. So it's nobody's fault, but he's leaving.
Sure.
Hello, he's not going to be paying his half the condo anymore.
Yeah.
So you always got to have an out, even if it's nobody's fault.
Especially with a boyfriend or a girlfriend who you do not share expenses with, and things like we were just talking about the common law things and all of that. And by the way, then you're getting into other legal partnerships and things like that you're going to have to enter, because there's no other contractual obligation to each other there, so
yeah,
that's you're setting yourself up for failure before you even started by doing that.
Yeah, so I understand people live together who don't necessarily get married, but if you're not married, you have absolutely no right of inheritance, not in this state.
Yeah,
so when people say common law marriage, that's short for English common law.
Gotcha.
And so since we're Spanish law community property, we don't have common law marriages here.
Gotcha.
But if you're not married, you have absolutely no right of inheritance. There's no financial security there. You're not going to, get half the assets. You're not automatically entitled to jack.
Yeah. You're really selling yourself out for this, and you don't need to.
So if you're going to do something like that, make sure that, you're a beneficiary in life insurance,
Yeah.
a beneficiary in retirement account, or, get the paperwork done.
And this isn't about an emotional thing, because I know the first thing, but I love the boyfriend, girlfriend, that we're never leaving. I'll say never. Yeah, you're saying that today, but ask every single couple that gets married and asking if they were going to get divorced in 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, whatever it is. And all of them are going to say the same thing you just said. It's like, that's not a reliable answer. I'm sorry. At least with a marriage, you have a contractual obligation. So there is a bit more entanglement and there's a bit more
security
there.
Yeah.
Whereas boyfriend, girlfriend, you're one argument away from never seeing that person again. You know what I mean? And that's how it works. So, and there's no strings, and legally anyway.
Yeah.
Unless you've been to, I guess, you get into that California common stuff and
I
all there.
don't know what that stuff is.
But that's in California.
Yeah, that's in California.
I just saw the time. We're running a little short on here. Is there anything we definitely wanted to get in there that we didn't get a chance to talk about? And we also want to do a little fact or fiction too.
Oh, well, there's all sorts of stuff, but we can use it next time. Maybe some of your listeners can, on the website, ask questions for the next time.
Yeah, let's do that. If you know what, and I'll remind you as we get closer to Matt here. But if you think about it, shoot me an email. The links there on the website, mike.winters@pvbcradio.com. I know it's a lot to remember, but shoot an email if you have any questions of anything we're talking about. Say, hey, I heard you and Matt talking. I'd love to ask about this. And we'll get it to Matt, and we'll have some answers for you next time.
Awesomeness.
So we could definitely do that.
Yes.
Got time for a fact or fiction for us?
Sure. So there's a Greek word, synchronicity. And so the prefix SYN means with, like synchronized with.
Okay.
And then kinesis is where you get the word kinetic, like kinetic energy.
Yes.
It means there's something's moving, like you throw a rock.
Constant movement, isn't it? Kinetic, or I don't remember the whole word.
So, but it's, if you get hit by a car, you're going to get hit with kinetic energy. Whack.
You'll learn what kinetic energy is.
So what's the Latinized word that's the equivalent of it? And the word is emotion.
Interesting.
So the Greek word is with motion. The Latin version is with emotion. How do you like Downton? I saw the movie this weekend. It was very moving.
Interesting.
So both words have that idea of not that it's a static feeling, but emotions are actually moving. They're kinetic. They're flowing.
I wonder, and I'm sure I'm being dumb here, but when I say like emotion, I start to think of like our internet stuff and like emails. And I'm wondering if there is a Latin base there for, I know most of us think electronic mail, but now I'm wondering, is it, or was it, maybe it's something in motion. Maybe there's a Latin base here that we're not, I don't know. I don't know, but
it's interesting that both languages, in the root, that the emotions have a motion to them.
Yeah.
It's not a static thing.
Interesting. Very cool. Well,
fiction and fact.
Absolutely. Of course, if folks, if you have any questions, and of course, if you can't wait until next month to get your questions to Matt here, and you've got some more pressing stuff, Matt will be happy to help you and your family with any of those questions for family law, setting up LLCs, stuff like that. He can help all of those kind of things.
Absolutely. BristolLawOffice.com. Give us a ring. Come see us.
Absolutely. Yeah. BristolOffice.com. Set up an appointment, and he'll be happy to sit down and talk with you and find out if you need to do some lawyering for you, or if it's just a matter of, no, fill out this form and you're good to go. So,
all right. Thank you, Mike. Enjoyed it.
Have a great day, and enjoy the cool weather while we got it.
Sure will. Thanks.
Hopefully get to maybe do a little outdoor stuff this week before. Hopefully there's not going to be court cases weighing you down. So, thanks, Matt.
Thank you much.
All right. It is